Welcome to Mindless Entertainment. My name is Jesse Milestone, and I'm back with Richard yet again. Richard, how are you doing this week?
Hey, I'm doing really well. Thank you.
I had so much fun with our last conversation. I think I told you talking about Star Wars in the 70s was incredible because that's my favorite era of movie making. But then last week, everything, all the Jack Nicholson stories, all the fun little anecdotes from that time were just so exciting. So I was hoping we would just dive right in today, picking up kind of where we left off. You were telling us about, those early years and the whirlwind of getting, going to Hollywood and then working on some more thoughtful projects, some more projects that really spoke to you, and just take us through a couple more of those, some other those times, those interesting projects, those fun people and characters you were getting to know through those years.
The really interesting thing for me in this career is how I'm led and put into unexpected positions because of the projects I've chosen. And of course, you never know. I never knew, what interactions I would have because as an editor, I'm always in the room by myself usually, and usually it used to be with film and now it's with computers, and I'm just used to working by myself or with my staff of a couple of assistants. So when I think now of some of the interactions I've had with people, what's kind of stands out. And so I think of a picture I did in 1999, 2000 called Shanghai Noon with Jackie Chan and Owen Wilson. And it was like kind of Owen Wilson's, I believe, kind of second big film. He had just done prior to that, a few years prior to that, a Bottle Rocket with his brothers. And then, of course, Jackie Chan has this long string of his films from Hong Kong, but then he did Rush Hour with, I can't remember, but I'm sorry, I don't mean to diss anybody. But anyway, to Jackie, because I've never, in all the films I edited, I've never had another Asian in front of the camera, and so for me to meet a legend, so we were filming up in Calgary, and he came into the editing room. This is the week before shooting started, and just for us to meet. And because I was raised in America, I have no, speak knowledge or speaking Cantonese. And I knew that Jackie was being from Hong Kong. He's a Cantonese speaking person. So I thought I would impress him by telling him, or at least pronouncing my Chinese name in Cantonese, which is like, about 10 words that I know in Cantonese pronunciation. Anyway, once I said that to him, of course, he thought I knew how to speak Cantonese. So he started me, and I started like, yeah, what am I going to say in reply? Then I really felt like a dummy after opening myself up for that. I should have just said, shut up, But I did
like
something.
That's a moment like right out of a sitcom. It's perfect.
That I wasn't really conversant with his action films, so all I knew was really athletic, and that he choreographed his action films, and I didn't realize until I started working on Shanghai Noon to which he choreographed. So for you viewers who haven't seen Shanghai Noon, there is a set piece in there where Jackie walks into the saloon, and there's this, it ends up being like 10 or 12 minutes. I don't know, but he takes on the whole bar room, and he kind of works his way through it, and he kind of handles all these cowboys. And it was set that was designed so that he had many different spaces to work his way through. And I didn't realize this until I was on the set to watch this. He has a choreography team, and they walk through and plan each battle, each confrontation he has, with the stunt doubles.
Wow.
And then he also uses and he orchestrates which props he would use. If he sees that he needed another prop, you know, he would ask a set decorator to get another prop there so that he could use that, so he can hang from that to swing over here, so he could land here, and so on.
That's
And
awesome.
it was so impressive, you know, to see how hard he worked with a stunt team to use the room. And he was going to waste any space in there, from this corner to this bar to this mirror, you know, to this post to this chair. I mean, he just had it like so finely worked out.
That's
incredible. And then after he shot, you know, the scene, and there were so many takes because for each fight, he had multiple takes. And I didn't realize this until, you know, it was all done and the dailies were out, that he watched it with his stunt captain or his stunt coordinator. And the coordinator says, okay, he showed up in the editing room one day. He says, well, you know, Jackie wants me to work with you. I never had any actor, you know, come into the cutting room to determine what takes to use, right? Usually, you know, the director would never allow that. But in this case, and we were very specific moves that were done, it helped me out a lot because there were so many takes. You know, I was kind of mind-boggling. Like, I don't even know how to choose this stuff. But it was a godsend because the stunt choreographer, director guy, he came in with he looked at his list that he had, the notes that he had taken from watching dailies with Jackie. And it was always, Jackie wants this, Jackie wants this, Jackie likes this. But Jackie likes take 9, you know, for this one. So I'll just go down, choose take 9, you know, okay, I know which one to use. So it really helped that I had that list to work from.
God, that's so nice.
A lot of his moves where he's flying through the air, he's wearing a wire. He's supported by a harness with a wire. And then when you land, you bounce, you know, in real life. So knowing that, okay, in visual effects, we're going to hide the wire. How do we take out the bounce? So I learned this little secret that the stunt guy says, you know, just cut out these 2 frames, you know, when he lands. So you cut out the 2 frames where he bounces. So he just cut out the 2 frames. And it looks like he just kind of, you know, stuck it really when he landed, right?
Nice.
And it's such a great trick to learn that, you know, by that time I've been editing movies for almost 30 years. And I'd be using jump cut in that way to be able to make more exact, you know, a move. So that was really cool. And he, you know, I had spoken previously about how generous, say, Jack Nicholson was in hosting dinners. Well, on location, Jackie was really generous because every Sunday, and I think we were on location for like 12 weeks, every Sunday, he hosted a Chinese banquet.
Oh, wow.
In a locally chosen Chinese restaurant. He chose different ones. It was democratic, you know, spreading around how he spent his money because it was on his own. And he treated not just department heads. He had like many of the cast, crew members, and he would have like 8 to 10 tables. And if you've ever been to a Chinese banquet, there were like 10 seats per table. So I would say maybe even 12. So obviously there were like 80 to 120 people. Then not only did he have then the full course, which is 10 dishes, he also furnished the wine, which he had one of his either assistants or I think his oldest son would bring in from their car cases of wine that they would bring in. Then he ordered from the restaurant because he chose better wine than the restaurant would have, right?
Of
and
course.
He would just have them bring in these cases of wine for us. And in the movie, there's a drinking game that he improvised with Owen Wilson when they're both sitting in bathtubs side by side as cowboys, and they're kind of they improvised something that was better than what was written, because what was written was kind of a more conventional cowboys drinking. But Jackie improvised something with where he's speaking Cantonese, kind of a drinking game in Cantonese. So, of course, it was hilarious. The things that I learned to do as an editor was how to accelerate when the story engages an audience.
Oh, yeah.
Now, most scripts, if structured properly, are structured in such a way so you, the audience, kind of understand within the first 10, 15 minutes, oh, the story is going to be about these two characters.
Yeah.
And even though they're separated, you as the audience, you're hooked, because you're figuring what's going to happen when he meets her, or she's in this situation. How is she going to get out of this?
Yeah.
You want the audience to kind of have a sense of how this is going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the one thing about the Jackie Chan character and the Owen Wilson character. Is the script. The way that it was written, these characters weren't going to come back together again until like 40, 45 minutes into the film.
Yeah.
And so I realized this, we had to like juggle some things just so that they could finally come together in a jail cell, because it's after the fight that I mentioned to you in the bar scene.
Yeah.
That they're both thrown into jail into the same cell.
Yep.
And of course, the hook for the audience is the Jackie Chan character, who plays a non-English speaking Chinese palace guard, imperial guard, meets Roy, who's played by Owen Wilson, who's this kind of surfer blonde dude, iconoclastic, irreverent, petty thief. So they're both in jail together. Now, Owen's character is kind of always a little off, and I think this was early on in the shoot, and his style was he was always trying to kind of like improvise his lines, and he would kind of like throw several different versions out there, because this is how he worked before. So instead of always just kind of saying the line one way, he would do variations kind of on top of each other, He would try one way or stop in the middle of the line, then he would try it again. And then, of course, Jackie in that picture, he learned English phonetically. So it wasn't the case that he always understood the improvisations that Owen would come up with. So it was really kind of an interesting that I was working with, because Jackie wasn't really playing dumb. He just couldn't follow some of the improvisations of Owen. And on the other hand, Owen, he was just kind of throwing stuff out there. Yeah. And the scene ended up where I was just trying to prolong that kind of discomfort. Jackie, his character, he didn't want to kind of give in to this dude because he knew he was a bad guy, and Jackie, he was there to save the princess, which is off screen. But he's a good guy, and he realized this guy is a criminal. And on the other hand, Owen realizes that Jackie is guarding something that he wants to have access to, that he can get rich from. So he's going to try to charm this Chinese guy. So it was really kind of an interesting interplay between these two characters, one trying to charm one and the other resist this and not quite kind of understanding what the con game was that Owen's character was pulling on him. Anyway, it ended up being a hilarious scene with a lot of improvisation by the two of them, because by the time they get to communicate, they try to break out of jail together. And
Yeah.
there's just, to me, it's one of the funnier scenes I had to work with because of what the actors did.
Yeah.
So I'd recommend seeing it just for the jailbreak scene.
I love that. I love, as I was working on my senior film back in college. I was shooting a horror, and I was working with amateur actors and stuff like that. And my whole thing was, well, we did all night movie shoots, and then we always shot the most stressful, tense scenes the latest because everyone was already tired, and so that we sort of got that organic tension there from something else, and we're able to use it for the. That was my little cheat around using, working with kids in college and all that.
You know, in 2006, I had a chance to work with Emilio Estevez, who wrote and directed a script called Bobby. And he had shot the picture. And it was about the day that Bobby Kennedy got assassinated at the Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles in 1968. Now, I came off an experience of a film where I had a bad experience. So when this script, was called to my attention and I had an interview with him, I thought this was really the perfect script for me to work on at the culmination of my 40, it was like about 40 years after I started working in documentaries in the mid 60s. And now I have a chance to work on a film about a story of someone who I admired a lot back in the 60s. So the way that Amelia had written the script, it was about the lives of all these other people at the Ambassador Hotel the day that Bobby got shot. But the film did not introduce Bobby Kennedy to the last act, to the third act, when he shows up at the hotel to make his acceptance speech. Because he won the primary that day in California. So it was, so in this story, even though it starts that morning at the Ambassador Hotel, we follow these various characters, like the hotel manager, the hairdresser, kitchen staff, some other guests. And so this, I think what Amelia was after was just to show how our individual lives, we all have these concerns, we have our lives to lead, and then we were caught in the middle of history being made.
Yeah.
So the story was linear in that it was compressed onto that one day.
Yeah.
And one of the device or the conceit that Emilio, as the writer, had was, we're going to say, even though people know this is going to be about Bobby Kennedy assassination, I'm going to save his character until the last act when he appears at the hotel. So we screened it like that, and anyway, it didn't work, or the production company that was behind it was running out of money, so that we couldn't really finish in post-production the work that we needed to do. And so Harvey Weinstein's company got involved. They saw it and they really liked it because, as we know, Harvey Weinstein is a big fan of the Kennedy family. So, by that time, this was the mid 2000s, 2006 it was, like I was saying. And once, of course, he got involved, that meant he was going to pump money into it so that we could finish it properly. We had a lot of sound work to do. We had to pay for the rights of a lot of footage, old footage, historic footage, and looping and so on. So we were really happy that his company got involved.
Wow.
But little did we know that once you get into bed with these guys, so to speak, then the demands start coming in about the changes that they want, because anybody that puts money in the project is going to have a say as to how a picture is cut. So, he had this reputation even back then of just being a really controlling guy, and I feared the worst. But I have to say, and this is why I'm telling the story, is the notes that we got from him, I think, and I think Amelia would agree with me, it helped improve the picture. Basically, what Harvey's note said, look, most of your audience today weren't even alive when Bobby Kennedy was assassinated in 1968. So you have to set the stage for who he is. You have to explain to your audience who he is. So among the things he asked for was a prologue. We needed to create a prologue prior to the beginning of the movie, the way it was shot and scripted. So I created a prologue, which ended up being a couple minutes long, that explained what the time of 1968 was.
Wow.
And then, based on other notes that Harvey submitted, we then had to sprinkle through the picture more references to Bobby in that day, so that by the time he appears actually in the film as was shot, we're then invested in him. Because one, if we know the context of the time, and two, if we don't know what he stood for, then why should the audience care?
Yeah.
So we were able, I worked with Amelia to figure out where he was so clever in his script, where like Amelia had written in that, say, people were watching television, but on television, what they were watching were like an exercise class by Jack LaLanne, or he would have a cartoon in there. Amelia had on the set anything that wasn't about politics. So we found that we had to do was to put politics, load it into it, and find all this other historical stuff. Bobby visiting Appalachia, this poor community in Appalachia that didn't have proper schools and our food programs, and showed like Bobby's humanity and concern for the common folk. And that's the kind of stuff that we had to work, on based on Harvey's notes. Like, let's fill it in with Bobby. So that was the thing that I have to say that it really helped our picture. So that was the one cool thing. Now, so I think we were reluctant, but we had to agree that it really helped. Now, the one thing I think really hurt the picture was that at the end, Emilio had in mind that after he gets assassinated, the end credits would be over this great historic footage of the funeral train that took Bobby's corpse from New York to Arlington National Cemetery. And for those of you that maybe don't know, I mean, there's a wonderful book by the photographer Paul Fusco that are still photographs of all the people that were lined up paying tribute to Bobby Kennedy's funeral train. There's this Israel footage that goes along the track, and you see all these people stunned, black and white and Asian families, young and old, rich and poor, all kind of standing in awe, looking in sadness, and some people, policemen saluting and all that on the side of the road. And it was just so moving. And then we got Aretha Franklin, to sing the song that was written by, I'm sorry, I can't remember. There's Bryan Adams and another really top composer that wrote the lyrics and composed the song that we would put over this funeral train. And it was, of course, very emotional tribute to this, main character of our movie. But that hurt the picture was the one big note that Harvey and his people insisted that we do was to take that out. And what they wanted us to do was to use all these still photos of the Kennedy family, including the brothers like John and the mom, and just still photos. It's kind of like the family photo album, flipping through it like that. And then it became not about the tragedy of Bobby Kennedy's assassination and the people that he inspired, it
Yeah.
became about the Kennedy family.
Yeah.
So telling the stories, like, you know, with anything, there's the good and the bad. I mean, people come in, they want to help, and they may not always help the way that you think would be best for the project.
Yeah, it's a lot of like we've talked about in the past too, where everyone has their own part, their own job, and they all have their own ideas, and not everyone wants to let go of that control, and then not everyone has to. You know, there is going to be that executive producer that no one says no to, and it's because I like your ending better. I think that's that original way that you guys had it. I agree. It's much more moving, and it's much bigger. It's for everybody. You know, you're telling a story about somebody that if you weren't alive at the time and you don't follow the Kennedys, you're not going to know as intimately as John F. Kennedy. And to do all that work, especially it's almost sort of short-sighted on his own. And after all the notes about making Bobby such a part of the picture and showing his influence and his reach into so many people's lives, to then cut yourself off from that message that you yourself wanted in the movie, you know, at the very end. It's sort of ironic.
So yeah, you know, I mean, the stories I'm telling now are the ones that just kind of stand out to me as we were talking. And probably for a lot of the films that I've worked on, there are interesting stories that I could tell that reveal our human nature, our prejudices, our biases, right? And, you know, so for those in the audience who are artists, you know, you might have one intention, but it could be so subverted by your audience or by that I guess I can say, don't get discouraged. Just kind of hang in there, and you know, you're gonna hopefully, you know, have your intention read well.
Exactly. I always like the way, I think it's the Monty Python guys, the way they talked about it. They said, we wrote jokes that we thought were funny. And it's, you know, at some point you have to do that. You have to make the stuff that you like, that you think is good, and that, you know, so hopefully someone else responds to it. That's really all it is. You know, hope to find the other people who see your vision the way you see it and get it out there. Otherwise, what else?
I think everybody has their best intention in mind. Yep. They're trying to help. Yep. And like you're saying, but you know, trying to help, that's very subjective, isn't it?
Exactly.
First film I cut digitally was in 1995. It was a film called Waiting to Exhale, and it was the debut film of Forrest Whitaker as director. And actually, because this was a year after I had taken lessons in using Lightworks, which to me was the preferable digital editing platform. It was more akin to the film machines that I was using. It was more akin to the chem because of the controls. Gotcha. Again, when I got hired to work on that picture, it was a 20th Century Fox. So the only editing machines they had available were Avids. So it was like, oh my God, I didn't even know how to work this. But you know, I figured out a way around it. I found an Avid instructor who wanted to get into the union as an assistant editor. So it was like a perfect setup. If I hired him, he could teach me, and then he could get into the union. So it was like a really, and then, you know, it shows you like how circumstances enabled you to do certain things, hopefully good things. And because we're on location in Phoenix, we had this little cramped room that we were both crammed into, and we had to sit back to back. His name was Dan Fouts. So Dan was sitting just right behind me at his setup, and then I was sitting at my setup. And it just worked out so well that because of that circumstance, it was just so easy for me to say over my shoulder, Dan, how do you do this? You know, and you say, Richard, push that, you know, key. And I have to say, I picked it up quickly because one, he was such a good teacher because he had done that, for a living.
Yeah.
And then, two, he got what he wanted out of it. So, it turned out that, it was a continuing transition for me. But then,
Yeah.
of course, just because it enabled me, the more I learned, I learned how it enabled me to do so much more.
Yeah. Yeah. It's wild too, because it's never stops. It's one of those things, like, as a director, you can go to schools and you can take lessons and in 10, 20 years, you can have the way you direct and it never changes another time for the rest of your life. But with editing, I mean, every film that gets worked on, someone might come up with a new technique. Someone might change the game. Someone might, add a new button, build a new effect. It's like constantly evolving. And even today, I mean, even with the digital software, like if you want to go from Final Cut to Avid, still there's like a whole learning curve if you just switch softwares that you're using. It's really wild. What do you think about too, now that you're hearing things? I mean, talk about Star Wars, how that's changed. Like now today on The Mandalorian, they're compositing special effects on set and they're getting a rough cut, as soon as the dailies are done. How wild is that? God.
That is crazy because, when I think about how we have this technology to do so much more,
Yeah.
Rather than referring to that specific thing, what am I thinking? I'm thinking of, has it really enabled us to tell stories that are meaningful? Because I think sometimes we fall into this trap of, the technology might enable us to do something faster or better, but is it kind of, helping the medium as a whole? I mean, for sure, digital editing has changed the language, the vocabulary of storytelling.
Yeah.
And I think, having digital editing techniques has expanded the way that we have told stories linear in the past. When you see the evolution of how stories are told from, I would say, from the mid '90s, perhaps I'll just choose that arbitrarily, from the early '90s to mid '90s to today, I attribute the growth, the development of nonlinear storytelling and nonlinear storytelling to the availability of that software.
That makes sense.
When you're editing a film, and it's so cumbersome, to be able to have little 2-frame cuts and 4-frame cuts, and you can move things around here and there, because it takes a lot of time to try it and then to undo it and then to try it again somewhere else.
Yeah,
Whereas now, with keystrokes, you can save so many different versions and try so many different versions to do this. And so in one way, it's been good because it has helped us expand vocabulary, and it's just made it so much more exciting to be able to tell stories, or not even just stories, but we're seeing to have flash forwards or flash backwards, and then to insert material, because obviously you can do that so much more quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's made it so accessible in a way too. I mean, there's open source editing software that does most of what, an iMovie or even there's some that even more advanced programs can do. So anyone can do it. But I guess the flip of that too, sometimes it's kind of the Jurassic Park factor, if you will. We spent so much time thinking about what we could do, we didn't stop to ask if we should. I think for me, sometimes in filmmaking, what happens is, we are so enamored with our technological advancements and all these cool things we can do that people don't stop to think about the story. Are they still telling a story that's meaningful? To me, a great example in modern filmmaking is Avatar. Where James Cameron is obviously a phenomenal director who's done incredible work, but Avatar came out and was the sensationalist box office smash, and people loved and raved about all its technological advancements, and now nobody talks about it. because that's all the movie was a big technological advancement in visual effects. And the story is just, Pocahontas repurposed on an alien planet. And that's another, people talk about that element of it too, how it came and went. Whereas a movie, you talking about the technological advancements you guys were making in a little room, marking up grease pencils on the film strips of Star Wars, people are still talking about that movie, not just because it's endured as a franchise, not just because there's other movies to talk about. People are still talking about Star Wars 1977 and what it did and what it meant for film, because it's more than just rotoscoping laser blasts and lightsabers and building incredible ships. It's about the time that, people like you spent in the editing room going, well, we need to bring Princess Leia into this scene here so you understand the humanity of the Death Star run, not just the cool, shiny effects and explosions. And that's what makes a movie really last and endure over just, wow, we made this incredible technological breakthrough and moving on. We'll all use that technology in the next 12 films and forget entirely about the one that you made. So.
I think it's really interesting to see, even in films today, what techniques are used in telling a story. Because I was interviewed on a film panel in this film magazine, Film Comment, about a couple of decades ago, because at that time, concerned about there's so many fast cutting. I think it was about the time that Moulin Rouge came out, that Baz Luhrmann directed, and that's the editing of that doing, because there was nothing, I don't think, on the screen longer than 2 seconds or 3 seconds, and it was just constant moving. And this panel talked about, is this the future, of filmmaking? Because now we can do this. Do we have to just kind of make everything short and fast?
Yeah.
But at that time, I said, well, it seems to me probably the pendulum, is going to swing back. I see confidence of many filmmakers in subsequent years that don't rely on cuts to be able to draw you into the story and use their camera moves and their staging. A good example would be Roma, that picture of Alfonso Cuarón made a few years ago. And everything was just kind of held and allowed you, the audience, to absorb what was going on rather than shoving it in your face. We've seen the two. I mean, is film supposed to be sensationalistic, or is it supposed to be kind of more conscientious in terms of reaching the consciousness?
And so much of that is about giving
you the pace to absorb.
Yeah. A lot of that is about giving your audience credit too, giving them credit that they're going to follow the story, that you don't have to bombard them with and force it to them. I think about James Bond movies, from when you go back to Sean Connery, the pacing of the fist fights, when he's fighting even the top henchman in an old James Bond flick, it's very slow. There's taking these moments. He takes a hit, he staggers, he stumbles, he comes back, he throws one that's usually not as powerful as the one he just took. And it's this, there's only a few blows thrown back and forth, but there's a story being told about either him being the underdog here or having to be creative to get out of this, or how is he going to escape. The new one, it's just cut. I'll never forget. I think it's Quantum of Solace. There's a car chase in one of the new ones where I think that James Bond's car blows up 3 different times, because I don't know who we're looking at. We're cut, spinning around, explosion, gunfire, Daniel Craig, someone else. And I don't even know what we're looking at. Meanwhile, then to go back to you discussing, going through a sword fight with Peter O'Toole. And I always talk about this as a fencer as well, where, he's bringing to you, this is a dance. There's a story in the moves. There's Jackie Chan being with his entire team of choreographers. Fighting action is not just a set piece. Action is part of the story if it's done correctly. If there's time taken with the choreography to understand that these dances, these moves, these flips and punches and swings of your arms are all part of the story, are all part of the dialogue, really. And just like in dialogue, if you cut mid-sentence every time you're trying to have a conversation, if you just cut halfway through everyone's sentence, it's going to be very jarring. if you do that in your action sequences, if you do that in your movement, if you just take us out, you don't let anything breathe or speak, it has the same effect in my experience.
Yeah, it's interesting for me to see a director like Sam Mendes, whose work I admire a lot, that he would do a picture like the James Bond picture I think you're talking about, that starts with an extended 20-minute cut action scene, and then throughout, maybe every 3 reels, every 2 reels, there would be another set piece of another 15-minute of action, cut. And then for him 2 years ago to do 1917, which is all one take, with maybe 1 or 2 hidden cuts in there. And I just feel like, here's someone that really understands the craft, and he can go both ways, that he could tell the story.
It's cool.
I really loved like Birdman and 1917, because to me, I know that they say, oh, it's all done in one cut, but I can spot, like if I looked at a Birdman, I can tell you, where the cuts, because of the tricks that the editor used. And then I can tell you also in 1917, I think they made about 2 or 3 cuts in there on moves, and I thought, okay, but only in kind of an editor, can spot that, because those are devices I would have used myself.
Yeah, I remember seeing that, because I remember this opening scene for this movie, Serenity. They're going through the whole set of the ship, and they touted it's 2 cuts. It's 2 scenes, or they walk, because they built the set as 2 separate pieces. So they walk through one part and they do a whole follow shot to the next part. And I remember watching, like, where do they cut? Where do they cut? And then as I got older and learned a little more about filmmaking, there's a whip pan right before he goes down the stairs into the next one. And I realized, on the whip pan, that's where they cut it, because it's this fast blurred motion. They can blur it one into the other and you'll never notice. I was like, oh my God, that's so fast. It's those magic moments that you don't know unless you know. It's cool. But yeah, it really begs the question. With with Mendes, like something like that, going into a James Bond, that's a franchise that has an identity, that has other forces involved, and you got to wonder how many people are there telling him, well, this is how we make a James Bond movie now. We make it like this. We make it like a Bourne movie with the fast action and this and that. And as opposed to when you watch him on a more artistic piece and you see his sensibilities, it really begs the question, whose decision was that in the James Bond film? Because his other work is not reflective of that type of storytelling. Yeah.
Well, I think when he was hired, that was like, here's the game plan. The producers, one of the James Bond thing is one of Barbara Broccoli, who's like the daughter of Alberto, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Who originated the franchise. So that's kind of like, hey, we're hiring you, so here's your palette, and he's skilled enough to be able to do that. But then, I heard him talk in person at one of the screenings of 1917 a few years ago, and he was talking about how he designed that because it was based on a story of his grandfather who was a soldier, and it was a personal project for him. And so it was something that he wanted to do, as opposed to.
Yeah, so not unlike you, working with certain teams on certain types of films because they're there, as opposed to then going on and having the freedom to say, oh, I'm going to do the projects that speak to me. Where do you feel the relationship is right now with sort of the, industry films that have a lot of backing, that have produced, big production houses behind them, and or oftentimes now we see all these sequels and adaptations, things that have precedence, remakes, something that already has an identity, that, versus independent filmmaking. Where do you see that conversation between, the mainstream industry and the more independent filmmakers, and how that relationship may or may not change what we've seen with some of this derivative filmmaking versus, ingenuitive, nonlinear, different types of storytelling?
Well, the money's always going to go, I think, where the audience is.
Yeah.
So, what's been a big driving factor, and, I'm not saying anything new, but I think when foreign money is involved, especially like Chinese money is backing so much, that it's going to give rise to pictures that don't depend perhaps so much on culture or language, or
Yeah.
dialogue,
Mhm.
because there's an international audience
Mhm.
that is just interested in adventure and in eye candy and
Yeah.
in anything that moves, that has impact, that has pacing.
Yeah.
And so the money's going to go there because making movies are so expensive that you can't just make a picture about childbirth. I was just
Mhm.
watching a movie called Pieces of a Woman, and
Mhm.
it's I guess you could say it's a small story. I mean, it's on a small scale, but it's a really universal story
Yeah.
that is very compelling
Yeah.
because it's about this one woman and how her life has changed, in childbirth. And I'm not going to say anything more about it for those that haven't seen it, but it really pulls you in. But I can't see a huge, market overseas for that, perhaps.
Mhm. Yeah.
But so I think it's true, what being made depends on, how big the audience is out there willing to see it.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, because of I'm just going to get maybe into a whole discussion about where the audience is. Is it in the theaters or is it streaming?
Yeah.
And what is the audience platform
Yeah.
for this?
I wonder though, with some of the changes. I mean, really, with coronavirus changing the map of theaters or accelerating those changes that streaming had brought about. Really, do you think there'll be more of an opportunity for independent filmmakers without these bigger backings, because streaming levels the playing field a little bit? Do you think there's more of an opportunity for some of those voices?
Yeah, I think even just this year, and this may just be kind of a continuation of the trend, but just this year, the pictures that I've seen. Well, wait a second. There's more than just what's hacking. It's also because the Me Too movement and Time's Up movement that has accelerated, I feel, the people behind the camera, or who's chosen to be behind the camera and what stories to tell. Because
Yeah.
there's an audience out there for the so-called smaller pictures and the
Yeah.
more
Niche.
stories that have not been told. So
Mhm.
I think it's really been great that, okay, for the audience that wants to see the blockbusters, yeah, they're going to make those, and that's great because there are people that want to be entertained to see those and not be told like, hey, this is a worthy story. It's like being told to eat broccoli.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
you're gonna have the vegetarians that just want to eat broccoli and they don't want to eat meat.
You know.
So I got to see just this year, like I was saying to you, the stories about both domestic and foreign made about especially term it this way, but about stories that matter to women, whether it's about childbirth or relationships with their children,
Yeah.
or their adopted children, or their sisters, or their gay brothers, or there's been all these great stories that I've seen from Switzerland and
Yeah.
Norway and those, and then there are the domestic ones, not to even mention the stories that have come out just this year about African American stories, from Judas and the Black Messiah to Ma Rainey's story to Miami One Night, and Malcolm and Marie, and I mean there's stories out for the whole audience to choose from. So there's a
Yeah.
lot of meals for vegetarians and those that love meat.
Exactly. And I hate to even bring this up, but I feel remiss not to when we're talking about the positive changes that have happened and the positive changes that have come. There is the other side of that. There are the people who are still not satisfied with the progress that we've had. And there are, I mean, I always say gratitude with hunger, be grateful for what we've had and the progress we've had while still being hungry and acknowledging the changes we need to make. But you do have, a lack of gratitude I've noticed on certain things. One example that comes to mind recently, Sia, a musician singer, made a movie that's very personal to her. It's about a young woman with autism, a very, very low functioning on the spectrum. And from what I've read about the story, this is somebody that Sia knows personally. It's based on somebody she knew personally, and worked with that person and worked with other differently abled people to try to tell the story of this girl, and initially tried to work with a neuroatypical actor to portray her. Ultimately, the girl had too rough of a time. It wasn't fair. It wasn't kind to her. And so they went with a neurotypical actor, as you'd call it, and a young girl that she'd worked with before. And there was a faction of the community that was very mad. I mean, outraged, completely outraged. She has been under fire. She's had to make edits to the movie. People are telling her all these horrible things. I don't think know if it's even come out yet. Because she didn't cast and she used differently abled actors in different parts of the movie. I think she even said she cast 3 different trans actors in the movie, but because the lead actress playing a autistic character wasn't autistic, she got torn to shreds. Where do you think that comes from, that attitude of like, it's not enough, it has to be all or nothing now? And is that something that, does that have a place in the filmmaking? Like, did that start from a good conversation, do you think, or is it just something? What are your thoughts on where that element comes into play?
Well, I admire the fact that all the people that have been disadvantaged have not had a voice, and they advocate their voices to be represented authentically. We want that.
Yeah.
But then still, we're making usually a work of fiction. We're doing a work of representation.
Exactly.
And you want to be able to tell, I think, that story as well as you can and most effectively.
Yeah.
Now, maybe I haven't seen Sia's work, and I happen to admire her work a lot. I love her music, and I feel she's really authentic in that. I mean, whenever I've seen her, say on Saturday Night Live, I love the fact that she doesn't, that she hides herself. At least, recent representations of her, and I love she doesn't play out the fact, just like how, oh gosh, I can't think of the terrific actress, singer now, Billie Eilish, who doesn't allow herself to play into the stereotype of we all have to look like Taylor Swift,
Yeah.
So, but if there's a picture now, Sound of Metal, where, okay, the actor plays, he's not really deaf, but, half the movie includes people who are actually deaf, and it really gives a showcase for that community to show like how they formed and helped each other. Yeah. So, at least I think maybe that picture has held that line, even though maybe the lead isn't completely deaf. But, he portrays, I think, a very sympathetic character that then leads you into that community to be able to, for us that are unfamiliar with that, to see how they've helped each other,
Exactly.
So I think, they're still making art, and
exactly.
And I don't think you can be pure, because you have to be efficient too in how you tell the story. You can't, if you only have 20 shooting days, because that's all the money you have and the time you have, you may not be able to do it with a person like in Sia's case. You don't have 2 days to do it,
Exactly.
And you want to tell the story to reach a lot of people.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I always come back to is people forget, they lose sight, they get it becomes this tunnel vision. You're so focused on having one thing that you don't realize the greater impact. And I always come back to complaining about actors, certain types of actors not getting certain roles, to me is the most privileged thing in the world. Like, oh, you should play. Guess what? If you're a gay actor, if you're a neuroatypical actor, if you're a disabled actor, you are already privileged because you are out there trying to be an actor. It means somewhere in your life, you have the luxury of choosing a non-working class job to pursue. So somehow you are lucky and privileged. people who are going to go watch a movie like that, who might experience it and learn from it, might be someone who saved up, 2 weeks of a paycheck because they wanted to go see the first movie about a trans outlaw because it spoke to them on some way. That person is going to get infinitely more value from a film like that than, the B-level trans actor you decided to give the huge A-list bump to go do this movie, who, guess what, may not be an A-list actor, not because they're trans. Maybe they're not an A-list actor yet because they haven't earned their chops, because they haven't done the work yet. And to me, it's like, you just have to separate these two things. We just have to remember when we're talking about making a movie, telling a story, it's about that. And all of the identity elements should be obviously respected, included, and thought about. But if they become the forefront in the pursuit of filmmaking, you're not making a movie anymore. You're doing something else, something entirely new and different, It's like you said, it's a work of fiction.
Yeah, well, like we were talking about, this pendulum has swung,
Yep.
from the Jazz Story, where, I can't remember the name of the actor, sorry. Al Jolson is portrayed, right? He portrayed in blackface, to where we are now, where we have to be completely correct. So, let me just kind of tell a little story from my childhood.
Mm-hmm.
My mom did not really speak English very well because she's an immigrant from China. One of her favorite pastimes when we first got a television in the house, because I'm of the age where when I was young, when a television came in the house, that was kind of like, we were the only family in our block that had a television.
Mm-hmm. And
one of the things that she loved, other than watching wrestling, which was like a big thing in 1949, was to watch Charlie Chan movies. And, growing up, there were not any Chinese detectives that you would see portrayed on the screen. Yep. But in this case, she loved it, with the fact that Charlie Chan was supposed to be this Chinese detective in the Honolulu Police Department. Yep. And he was played by a succession of non-Chinese actors. Mm-hmm. But still, for her, she just kind of like loved that. She even let me, who was going to school and stuff, she even let me stay up late. She would wake me up because those movies, because they were old movies, played late at night. So she would let me watch them with her. Yeah. And even though she might not have understood all the dialogue, it gave her such pride that she would see a character that was supposed to be a Chinese detective solve all these murder mysteries. And occasionally his son, who was actually a Chinese actor, would be in there. So, for her, it meant a lot to have that image of there. Yeah. And there was no kind of political correctness or objections to that was not the actor. So it meant a lot for her. So at the time, obviously, that we're in, of how strict we want to be, we would never allow that today, for an Asian character. Look at a couple of movies centered on Chinese actors, from Minari recently to Farewell and Crazy Rich Asians. We've seen the pendulum now go from Charlie Chan, played by Sidney Toler, to the ones that I cited.
Yeah, it's really interesting because even with Crazy Rich Asians, which actually I just showed Jeff for the first time the other day, the lead actor in that is not 100% Asian. He's, I think, half.
Yeah,
and he got pushback though for that role. People were mad. There were some people that were mad because he's not. And I thought, I was thinking about that. I'm like, imagine what that feels like for him. The people who want to go on take to social media and yell and scream that you didn't get a pure Asian are coming at from the perspective of, oh, you're whitewashing my culture. Meanwhile, the way this guy is receiving it, he probably got bullied as a kid by other Asians for not being Asian enough. And now as an adult, as this amazing, accolade in his career, is getting bullied by other Asians for not being Asian enough. So it's really sort of, interesting when you put it in that perspective. It's like,
for sure. Yeah, this pushback that we get to be pure and whatever. There are several other cast members in Crazy Rich Asians. I think Gemma Chan
Yeah.
I think her father may be Chinese, but her mother's Scottish or something like that. So,
Yeah.
you know, and she's British. So there are several cast members,
Yeah.
depending on where they were born, you know, so-called mixed race. But aren't we all? I mean, come on. You
Exactly.
know, you see the news. I mean, because I think, you know, if we look at contemporary America, talking about members of tribal nations,
Yeah.
which ones are eligible to be considered, you know, officially a Navajo, or which one a
Yeah.
Cherokee.
Yeah.
And recently, I think I just heard on NPR the story about one of the tribes had enslaved people that they, because they were not of that tribe by blood, were
Yeah.
not allowed to be, you know, officially members of that tribe. And
Yeah.
then recently, that the Supreme Court of that tribal nation, I think it's the Navajos, that
Yeah.
changed that ruling. Say, okay, you know,
Huh.
our ancestors had enslaved you or imprisoned you to be our, you know, to work for us, but even though you're not of our blood, we're going to allow you to claim membership in our tribe now.
That's so crazy.
So
Yeah.
like just these legal
Yeah.
constructs, right?
So that even came up in the movies when they made the Lone Ranger movie, which, you know, was not a great service to the original show, but there was a huge backlash because Johnny Depp was cast to play Tonto, and everyone
Right.
was flipping out about it. And he said, well, I'm 10% Cherokee. And like, well, that's not enough. And then Cherokee Nation came out and said, actually, we acknowledge Johnny Depp we have previously acknowledged Johnny Depp as a member of our tribe. So we're not bothered by this. Please stop, acting like we are. It's because exactly like at what point then does this just become the thing you're fighting against when you want to say, well, you have to be pure blood this, pure blood that, pure blood that. All right. At what point does this obsession with identity just become the bigotry and divisiveness that you're trying to work against, So.
Yeah, I did. Boy, it's so tricky about what percentage, you know, of your parentage, yeah, that would qualify you. I mean, that's resulted in the miscegenation laws,
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
that were
Exactly.
in effect into about 1967 in this country. And I loved it how in that picture on the rocks, how it was cast, you know, how Sofia Coppola cast, because it was Martin Wayans played the husband in that case, and their kids, the two daughters, were obviously a mixed race because it looks like Rashida is supposed to be white. So their kids were kind of like more blended, you know, more obvious. So, you know, I like that kind of portrayal of that family.
Yeah.
And there was no deal made about it, you know, where Bill Murray as the dad didn't talk about, well, I told you so, you know, you shouldn't have done this or you shouldn't do that. So that was not even, at play, in that story. So that's the kind of story I feel is encouraging, where it kind of treats what is kind of common for families, that you accept this, and this is part of 21st century America.
Exactly. And that's the whole thing. If our media doesn't treat it like it's normal, we'll never treat it like it's normal. If we keep making movies that go, look, it's a gay family about being gay, and it's all about being gay and how weird and different it is to be gay, then we're never going to walk down the street and see a gay family and go, oh, they're just like us. We're going to think about all the things we bombarded with about how different they are from us and how I don't understand and how I can never understand it, as opposed to when we see mixed race couples in commercials or movies, when we see gay couples as I was talking about the show The Rookie that I love, that just treats this one gay character. He's a gay black police officer. And when he goes and he meets a guy and they have chemistry, they flirt and they go out on a date, and it's treated just like any other character in a heterosexual relationship. And it's like, that's progress. That's when you wake up and you walk out into a world and everybody is allowed to go do the things that make them happy, and nobody else tries to stop them or fight them on it or tell them they're wrong or different. As long as the things you're doing aren't hurting other people, that's what progress and that's what inclusivity really looks like.
Well, that's what I feel like, we're talking about films, film can portray people in such a positive way without going overboard. It presents a character as being a human being, like you were saying.
Exactly.
There's another thing that I've seen recently that I love called the 40-year-old virgin.
Yep.
And here, the heroine in it, she's not obviously the type of having the body shape or something like that of what you would see portrayed in a movie. Of course, since she wrote and directed it, she cast herself in the part because, in a way, she's telling her story. And I love that. And that she's had a normal sex life and relationships with men and stuff like that. But she found home to be able to tell her story in her interactions with people. And there wasn't, other than for any remarks that she made about herself, no one else kind of called attention to, well, you don't have this or you're not that. I mean, she was her character. And I just thought that was beautiful, and how she was that character.
I love it. I think comedy becomes such a vessel for truth, and you always see that in every era, in every generation. Comedy is always the genre that gets to keep pushing the envelope and keep breaking the barriers. It's where you break down a lot of those walls and a lot of those stereotypes. But all said, I actually think I'm gonna ride us into our conclusion, because I've thought we had an awesome discussion, exactly what I was hoping for, where we got some more amazing stories that you can hear nowhere else but here. And I really was hoping to dive into a lot of this that we did talk about your thoughts, on filmmaking and storytelling. And it really, thank you. You gave me everything I was hoping for. And this has been an incredible couple of weeks building the storytelling, and really it's not over. I mean, the audience may or may not realize, but you and I go on and on before we start recording and after we record. So and stay tuned, because now we have plans in the works for a pre-Academy Awards live show to discuss some of the nominees when we get a little closer to that. So thank you everyone for watching. Thank you again, Richard. Any last thoughts you want to say? Because we're going to put a pin officially on this series, but obviously we'll be welcoming you back anytime you want to be here. But any last thoughts you want to say, any words of wisdom you want to impart upon the mindless mob before we close out this series?
Let me just talk to leave a thought with artists out there,
of course,
who are looking for recognition, are looking for success. And I like to think of success in this metaphor that, for those of us who are creative and trying to find success, is that it's really a train ride. And success is not the destination. Success is a stop along the way of our train ride, because some stops are when the doors open, and that stop is success. The doors close, and then the train ride goes on, and the next stop, the doors open, and then they say failure. The doors close, the train goes on, and the next one might say failure, and then the next one after that might say success. So it's not a destination that we get to, which I discovered. I mean, I would not have said this 40 years ago, because after getting an Oscar and being in award-winning pictures, I thought, like, hey, man, I'm hot shit. Anything I do is going to be successful, because then I work on stuff that nobody ever even saw or people would laugh at. So, it only takes me a while to realize that, okay, it's a ride we take, and some stops are going to be successful and some stops are not. But that's not the point of it. The point of it is the ride.
Yeah, it couldn't be a more beautiful way to end this. So I'm going to say nothing else except thank you infinitely, Richard, for all of the time, the stories, the gems you've shared with us. It has been my absolute pleasure. And until next time, God Empress, out.